We are still waiting for the parliamentarian, but we have a clever backup plan if we don't have a parliamentarian, and that is the chancellor is here, and we can ask the chancellor to fill in as the parliamentarian. Since one of the first things we're going to be doing is to hear the report from the Canons Committee on a change to the standing rules of order, which I think you all have had distributed. We don't want to get started without the parliamentarian in case there's a question. All right. I believe I saw Rich Sayer here. Great.
I'm here.
All right, thanks, Rich. Oh, here's Kathleen. Oh, great. Fantastic. Rich, you've avoided having to be the parliamentarian yet again. Congratulations.
Yippee.
All right. This will be an interesting meeting because we don't have, I don't think, the capacity to have side channel conversation with the chat, with private chat turned off. And I don't know that we can reconfigure that. So you'll have to we'll all bear with one another in this moment. I think, are we all present? Marianne or Liz, are we about ready to be able to start looking at the numbers? And I think we must be close to a quorum.
Yes, we are.
Okay, great. Thank you, Bettine. Then why don't we begin? I'm going to call this special convention of the Diocese of Rhode Island to order. Let us pray. Almighty and ever-living God, source of all wisdom and understanding, be present with those who take counsel in this special convention of the Diocese of Rhode Island for the renewal and mission of your church. Teach us in all things to seek first your honor and glory. Guide us to perceive what is right, and grant us both the courage to pursue it and the grace to accomplish it. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. We have a opening hymn to play, and I want to thank the people from Ascension and their friends at Transfiguration as well. Kristen? Well, maybe we need to come back to the hymn. Oh, wait, here we go. I take it back. I am seeing an image. Is anyone hearing music?
No.
Okay. I'm wondering if something complicated is going on with Vimeo. And rather than sit here and look at this, Marianne, are we ready to have a test vote? All right, here we go. While we're waiting for us to figure out what's happened with the video, and this is important because we have a lot of videos to show you today, we're going to practice voting. And I see you've already started voting. Good for you all. You get to vote once. Should the Rhode Island state drink be changed to Dell's? And if you vote, this is how we'll manage voting in real time. And we'll give you just a few more moments to register your choice. For those of you who are new to this program, we'll have to figure out how to actually do that vote. But it should have popped up on your screen, and I will be closing the vote in approximately 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. And I hope you are seeing that 57% of you voted that the state drink should be changed from coffee milk to Dell's. We didn't give you another option, so we just up and down vote. Hopefully that will be sufficient for what we have before us. Kristen, have we sorted out what the issue was yet, or are we still working on being able to show the videos? I'm sorry, you're muted.
We're going to try again.
Okay, you want to try again?
Yes.
All right, here we go.
Can you see it?
We can.
Okay.
Oh dear. Well,
it's another, isn't it?
yeah, I'll tell you what, Kristen, why don't, while we're waiting, we'll go ahead, and I think probably it's a bandwidth issue. Maybe what you need to do is, if we can quickly try and download the videos we have, or if we still have copies of them on your local computer, maybe they can be run from your local computer.
Okay.
Well, so heads up for those of you planning your annual meetings, don't do what we just did. We thought we had all planned out. We're going to make this so it didn't all go sideways, but there we are. If you have a question at any time, during this special convention, I invite you to please type it in the chat box, and one of the staff will recognize it and make sure that we answer it. If anybody who is here who is not a voting member of the special convention and does not have voice to be present, and that would include people like the chancellor or people like postulants for holy orders, then I would ask you to be looking over on the Vimeo link that will be showing up in the chat box in a moment. We will have a few break times. We may have more break times as we try to sort out the electronics issues. And if you're going to, now here's the important thing. If you want to make a motion and speak to the matter on the floor, you need to use the raise your hand button, which is, where is it? It should be in the participants window.
At the bottom of the participants window where it says more,
Okay.
over to the right.
Okay, there's the raise your hand button and applause. So that will allow us to recognize you. And when you are speaking, I'd ask you to give your name, that we'll be able to see that, and your congregation that you're serving or that you attend, of which you are a delegate. And we will then invite you to speak.
And I do think I have the video now.
All right, we're gonna try
Famous
one
last
more.
words. Can you see it?
No, we're just seeing that you've started screen sharing. All right. I'm going to call on, we'll come back to that. I'm going to call on Bettine. Bettine, if you'd unmute yourself, would you, as Secretary of Convention, can you certify that a quorum is present?
Yes, good morning, everyone. I certify that we have a quorum, which is 1/3 of all the clergy and 1/3 of all the parishes and missions represented by at least one delegate.
Thank you. I am going to call on the parliamentarian, Kathleen Hall, to present the membership requirements and the rules of order for this special convention. Kathleen,
Good morning.
Perfect.
The convention is governed by the Constitution, canons, and rules of order of the Diocese of Rhode Island. In addition to clerical and lay members, all deputies to General Convention, all officers of the diocese, and all chairs of commissions of the diocese are entitled to a seat and a voice, but not a vote. Only a member has the right to offer a resolution, make a motion, and vote. Registered delegates and clergy who are canonically resident no later than August 11th, 2019 are members. Convention is open to all persons unless otherwise ordered by the convention. Are there any questions? I think we're all set.
All right, thank you, Kathy. I'm going to introduce the Canons Committee report, which will amend our standing rules of order. Richard Sayer, as Chancellor, would you speak to that matter?
Yes, certainly. The annual convention of the Diocese of Rhode Island is governed by the standing rules of order of the diocese, dated October 23rd, 2010. Those standing rules of order do not allow for the annual convention and voting and the election of persons to be held virtually. The Committee on Canons held a meeting recently and recommends the following amendments to the standing rules of order. Section 15A, revised as follows. Nominations. A, by written nomination provided to the chair of the committee at least 45 days prior to the date on which convention is scheduled to meet, signed or electronically endorsed, or electronically endorsed is the addition, by not less than 3 members of convention and accompanied by a brief biographical description. Section 19 was added and is a new section to allow for virtual conventions, and reads as follows: Virtual convention. The ecclesiastical authority shall have the power to declare that an annual convention or special convention be held virtually, which means real-time interactions that take place over the internet using integrated audio and visual, chat tools, and application sharing. And the third and final revision was to Section 20 with respect to Robert's Rules of Order. Unless in conflict with the canons of the Episcopal Church or of the diocese, or with the standing rules of order of the diocese, the conduct of conventions shall be guided by Robert's Rules of Order. And the guided by is the addition made at the suggestion of our parliamentarian, who is an expert in these matters, and it allows for flexibility in terms of utilizing the rules of order in unique circumstances. That is the extent of my report.
Thank you, Richard. Just a reminder, if you're not speaking, if you could turn off your mic, we're hearing some noises that are extraneous. Is there a motion to approve the amendments to the Standing Rules of Order of the Diocese of Rhode Island dated October 23rd, 2020, as just presented to this special convention?
So moved.
Thank you. That is moved, and that was Linda Griggs who moved it. Do I have a second?
Second.
And David Ames has seconded it. Are we ready to vote, or is there discussion? I think we're ready to vote. Marianne, would you put the poll up? Those who have vote, would you please vote? If you haven't voted yet, please vote now. I will close the vote in 10 seconds. And the vote is closed. Thank you. We have voted in favor of approving the amendments to the standing rules of the Diocese of Rhode Island. All right, and the vote was 126 in favor and 1 opposed. And let's see, hopefully you can all see that now. Kristen, are we ready to try that streaming again? I just want to see if we can get this to work, because there's a whole bunch of things that depend on us being able to get it to work. And if not, we take a quick break to see if we can figure this out.
Yes, let's give this a try. Can you see this now?
It will come up. I think you're starting to share the screen. Your sharing screen is up, so I think it'll come up.
All right, well, that's not working. Just so we can see if we can do this, and we may have to do things the old-fashioned way. Kristen, why don't we see if we can show the treasurer's report? Just see if we can get started, and then we can stop that. I just want to see if it's an issue with that particular bit of video about the hymn, or if we have another issue.
Bishop,
Yes.
we need to vote on the standing rules of order as amended apply to this convention.
Oh, thank you.
I don't have that motion in front of me, but I think it's will come up on the screen.
I have it right now.
Okay.
So I will ask for a motion. Is there a motion to approve the standing rules of order of the Diocese of Rhode Island dated October 23rd, 2010, as amended November 7th, 2020, to serve as the rules of order for this special convention?
So moved.
Seconded.
Thank you. We have it moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Are we ready to try voting? Okay, and we are voting. $15 more seconds. Five, four, three, two, one. Thank you. The motion has passed.
100% good.
Thank you. All right, Kristen, let's try one more time and see if we can show the treasurer's report. At least Jed started, and then I'll ask you to stop. Chris, that's a very good point. Marianne is asking if maybe I could try sharing it, and I think I can, just in case.
Host. Mm. No.
Kristen? No. All right, Kristen, why don't you stop sharing your screen, and I'm going to try and share my screen. Are we seeing it?
Yes.
Away from your summer, arise when you see, a new day is dawning for all those who weep. The people in darkness have seen every heart, the Lord of our longing has come in the night. Let us see our tears be turned into dancing, for the Lord our God has turned the night into day. We are sons of the morning, we are daughters of day. The one who has loved us has lightened our way. The Lord of all kindness has called us to read a life for his people, to set their hearts free. Let us build a spirit of loyalty
Oh, comfort my people, make gentle your words, proclaim to my city the day of her birth.
Let us fill the city of God, may our tears be turned into dancing, for the Lord, our light and our love, has turned the night into day. Fill the city of faith, may our tears be turned into dancing, for the Lord, our light and our love, has turned the night into day.
Well, it worked. Hooray. Once again, the junior high AV president comes through. Now, what we're going to do is I'm going to introduce the treasurer of the diocese, Mr. Jay Candon, and we will be hearing his presentation momentarily. Just give me a second to move things around here. And where are you, Jay? I just saw you. Here we go. And screen. Two.
Good morning. This is Jay Camden, your elected volunteer treasurer. Bishop Nisley and my sisters and brothers in Christ, the 2020 Treasurer's Report to Convention is presented in accordance with our diocesan canons. It is an honor to make this report as your elected treasurer. Before I begin the formal report, as I did last year, I gave a shout out to my immediate predecessor, Bob Batts. Owing to his continued availability to me and to others in leadership around the diocese, I want to again express my appreciation for all that he has done and all that he continues to do. Thanks, Bob. Now back to my presentation. As we've done every year, the diocese's 2019 financial statements were audited by independent certified public accountants. They rendered an unqualified opinion on it. Now, unqualified is a term of art among CPAs, which is substantially equivalent to saying the financial statements are fairly presented, that they are reliable. The audit has the effect of supporting the reliability of 2019's internally reported monthly and annual financial statements that are prepared by our finance department under the dedicated leadership of Joan DeSalles, Director of Finance, and are instrumental in managing the operations of the diocese. Now, at the conclusion of their audit, the Diocesan Audit Committee met with the independent CPAs. It was in September of this year, and accepted the 2019 financial statements. Every month, the detailed financial information of the diocese is regularly shared with appropriate persons and committees charged with budget oversight. These include the Commission on Finance, as well as the Diocesan Council. All information can be found on the web at episcopalri.org. Questions you may have about this report or any financial aspect of the diocese can be directed to me today, or you may contact Joan DeSalles, Dennis Burton, our CFO, or myself at any time by text, email, or even though it's old-fashioned, by telephone. I will pause a moment while the slide is brought up for you to see. Now, the statement of financial position, sometimes called the balance sheet, as of the close of 2019, shows our total assets of being slightly more than $42 million, about 18% more than at the close of the prior year. There was about $1 million of cash, as usual, $360,000 of receivables, beneficial trusts amounting to about $500,000, property and equipment of about $8 million, and investments with a market value of $32 million. The investments are held and managed by the Diocesan Investment Trust, a separate entity of the diocese, which is also audited annually by independent CPAs. Now, on the liability side of the balance sheet are temporarily unpaid bills of about $260,000. This is the only debt we have, and it amounts to just 0.6% of total assets. In other words, the diocese fund balance at the close of 2019 was $42.3 million. This means that on an accounting basis, our assets exceeded our liabilities by $42 million. Now, the statement of activities in lay businesses, it would be the income statement or the profit and loss. But for us, it's the statement of activities, shows that apportionment at the reduced rate of 15% was 41% of total revenues for the diocese during the year. In the prior year, apportionment accounted for 43% of total revenues. Included in other revenue of about $2.5 million is about $1.4 million of distributions from the Diocesan Investment Trust, much of which is donor or council restricted for various programs, and our total revenues of about $4.2 million. All of these numbers, as I mentioned before, are under continuous review. The finance department conducts a self-review. The treasurer compares each of the monthly financials to the pre-approved diocesan budget on a detailed basis. The treasurer's analysis is shared not only with the Commission on Finance and the Program and Budget Committee at each of their monthly meetings, but at each meeting of the council. Next year's budget for 2021 will be presented later this morning by Dennis Burton, our volunteer CFO. The Diocesan Investment Trust has existed since 1958 as a separate trust, supported by a trust committee of diocesan volunteers on rotating 3-year terms. This entity has no financial connection to the diocese other than it holds invested assets to generate stable income and preservation of principle to the diocese, as well as participating congregations of the diocese. As of the close of 2019, the invested funds of the DIT approximated $32 million. The DIT committee meets quarterly with the professional managers at Bank of America. A written investment policy guides the committee and the professional managers. Now, while I have your ears, I would like to point out that the annual expense of managing this portfolio is extraordinarily low, at less than 60 basis points, or 0.6%. This is extraordinary and difficult to find for a similarly managed portfolio of investments. The goal of the Diocesan Investment Trust is to achieve a steady annual return on a total return basis and reliable annual distributions of about 4.5% of the invested funds. I just don't know where you can find a return like that. We encourage all parishes and missions of the diocese to consider investing their endowment funds in the DIT. Contact the finance office for information on this. Now, this slide depicts our apportionment income history over a multi-year period. Apportionment income in 2019 was exactly as expected, $1,723,000. Apportionment, as many of you know, is now 15%. It is down substantially from the 17.5% of several years ago and has been, we think, contributing to the financial health of many parishes. Now, in closing, I want to thank you all for your attention and my sincere gratitude to your dedicated parish treasurers. I have been in that role and have a good sense of what it takes to get the job done. So I thank them all for their extraordinary contributions of time and talent in supporting the complex financial reporting requirements of our churches and the diocese. This concludes my report, and I thank you all for your attention.
Thank you, Jay. I see 2 hands up. Are there questions for the treasurer? I will call on David Beerley, who is is the first person who have raised his hand. David?
Actually, I had a question on the motion that we were passing earlier, so.
Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize. I didn't have that. I didn't see that. So if you lower your hand, I will. Actually, David, do you want to ask your question? Is it something that we can try and answer?
I was just going to comment that you stated in the motion that we were going to allow the use of the internet. You might want to consider rephrasing that to allow for any future technologies as well.
Okay, thank you. Catherine, you had your hand up. Do you have a question regarding the treasurer's report? Sorry. Can you unmute yourself? Catherine, you're muted.
I just wanted to know if on the DIT slide, it says 2020 performance, but the dates reflect time from December 2018 to September 2019, and I was wondering if that was something that should have been, the date should have been different.
This is Jay Camden. Thank you for your question. I believe it's accurately depicted, but I'd be happy to discuss that with you offline if this, after looking at it again.
All right, Catherine,
is that satisfactory?
Yeah, I'd be happy to talk about it. It was confusing to me because it said 2020 performance, but the dates were 2018 and 2019.
Sorry. So I look forward to talking to you about that right after the convention. I'll be here.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I believe, so this is the confusing part. That canonically we're required to have the treasurer's report. I believe we are required to accept it, and I am going to ask for a motion to accept the treasurer's report as presented.
So moved.
Thank you. That is moved. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded.
Thank you. It's moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Is there any, let's do it this way. Is there anyone opposed? Then, because I don't think we had a poll ready, I'm going to rule that we have approved we have accepted the treasurer's report as it was presented. I am now going to turn to the program and budget report, which is a presentation of the budget as well. I'm going to introduce Mr. Dennis Burton. Many of you have gotten to work with Dennis in this past year. I do not have words to tell you how grateful I am that Dennis has come into this role in the Diocese of Rhode Island, especially in this particular moment when we are facing the challenges we're facing. Dennis, I do not say it enough, but I just want to say publicly and again, thank you for what you are doing for all of us. You've managed to take the finances and manage them for us so that they don't become the lead thing that we have to focus on. Now, I'm going to try to do this again, and hopefully I can share Dennis's report. Kristen, I think we have you sharing. So I'm going to go ahead and share.
Good morning. It's my pleasure to present the Diocesan 2021 budget. Before we get started, though, I'd like to thank members of Diocesan Council, Commission on Finance, Program and Budget Committee, and Diocesan staff, all who worked collaboratively to craft this budget. This budget's a bit unique from previous budgets, and we'll go through more details as I follow a presentation with what I personally think is one of the greatest breakthroughs of our time, the PowerPoint presentation software. So I just don't know how I would fulfill my ministry without PowerPoint. Love this software. So we'll open up the presentation and the agenda for today. We will go through the 2021 budget, income and expenses, as we traditionally do each year. In the past, though, we're going to shift our focus and not to diminish the importance of the ministries that we typically highlight in these presentations. But just given the uniqueness of this year with COVID, we wanted to spend some time on presenting the thoughts of our collective group and how we can financially support our churches in 2021 through the pandemic. It's become more protracted than when we thought last spring when it launched. It's having financial impact on our churches. And so we worked collaboratively as a team to put together proposals to Diocesan Council that were approved in September. There's 3 key initiatives that we'll address today as part of this agenda. It's going to focus predominantly on understanding the impact of the pandemic on church income. How does that then cascade into apportionment forecast for 21? Additionally, the PPP loan was a unique subsidy from the government that thankfully extended to religious organizations. And so we want to try and think through the impact of income from those loans and churches that did not receive a PPP loan that are experiencing financial challenges. How can we support those churches as well? First, though, we'll start with the budget. At a macro level, it's $4.15 million. Matches expenses between revenue so that the surplus is zero. That means it's a zero-based budget with no surplus or deficit budgeted. Traditionally, we do this every year, and you'll notice that the 2020 budget number is very similar to the 21 budget. We did have an increase from 2019, and we'll talk about that in the next slide. This $4.15 million is broken down into an operating budget and a non-operating budget. Non-operating revenue and expenses represent approximately 8% of the total budget. These are associated with restricted endowments. As an example, endowment that funds maintenance of a historic church, Old Narragansett Church. There's an endowment that funds Medicare supplement benefits for retired clergy. The bishop's discretionary funds are in here. Those don't directly impact the operation of the diocese. They're linked to restricted endowments specifically. So we're going to focus today on the operating budget, and that represents about $3.82 million in 21. It's very comparable to 2020 as well, as you saw in the total income numbers. And there was a growth from 2019. Now this 3.82 million is spread across departments that are outlined in the document where a link was provided with the diocesan materials. So it's the summary level budget document has these same departments organized by congregational development. Now the income from that is from endowments that support our grants to parishes and churches for congregational programs. Youth and family, which includes camp. Outreach and advocacy is Episcopal charities, predominantly. Office of the Bishop, there's an Episcopate fund that funds a portion of the payroll for the bishop. Governance, which you'll see is much higher than the other departments because it includes apportionment income. And then other, which historically has been a very small miscellaneous income category. But in 2020, we took on Edwards Homes into the diocesan financials from the Episcopal Housing Foundation. And that's the predominant reason for the growth in the total budget of 3.6 million to 3.8 million. Now in 21, we will take on Center for Reconciliation within the diocesan financials as well. And that's the reason for this additional increase in the blue chart, which represents the recommended 21 budget, yellow, which is the 20 budget, and green, which is the 19 actuals. I will make one point in camp. You'll see revenue is dropping. And that's really a misperception because in 19, we had a gala event that generated $230,000 in income. That's not being replicated in these 2 years. And so therefore it looks like the revenue came down, but it was actually because of a unique event in 19. We do expect revenue to drop some in 21 with camp. And the reason for that is one of the key assumptions on income. The ECC will open in the budget as far as a forecast plan, June of 21 to host summer camps. Really dependent upon the pandemic and how it continues to evolve, but that is what's built into the budget and why the revenue is slightly down because we're not planning on hosting any conventions or conferences or retreats in the first half of the year. The DIT Investment Committee, DIT, we love to throw around acronyms. It's Diocesan Investment Trust. And the investment committee meets quarterly. In August, they decided to maintain the existing dividend rate of 63 cents per unit through 21. What that does is provide stability for the income from our investments. Particularly in the diocese, it's 30% of our total operating income. In churches, it approximates 14% on average. It's a significant component and provides stability and income for the churches and dioceses. We're also incorporating as a key assumption that vaccines will be broadly available in 21 and will hopefully allow some programs that had been put on hold, such as group events, to be able to restart and generate additional income for the churches and for the diocese for some of the programs we've had to halt, such as summer camp. On the expense side, the total expenses pretty much mirror the operating income. And as you'll see, they're very comparable for 21 and 20 and grow from 19. And it's for the same reason as it was on the revenue side. Then in this other category, the expenses associated with Edwards Homes and CFR are coming into the financials and raising the numbers. You'll see that there's a very broad distribution. On the revenue side, we saw that apportionment predominantly weighted the governance compared to other categories. But that apportionment income is used to fund the different departments on the expense side. And so you see a broader distribution of the expenses across the different departments that we've already reviewed. Also notice that in each year, it's fairly stable, not any real significant changes between these with the exception of other that we've already discussed. Assumptions on the expense side, no incremental hires on diocesan staff and no layoffs. PPP loan that we received help with that. Payroll expenses are assumed to be flat, and then includes a cost of living allowance or a COLA increase would be 0 in 21. We did receive confirmation on the medical benefits being 3.5% in 21 and 2.7% increase for 21. Churches may want to take note of that as you're typically working on budgets this time of year, and you can use those numbers in your budget assumptions for your own church medical and dental expenses for staff. Center for Reconciliation, as I mentioned, was coming into the diocesan budget on the non-apportionment side of the budget. Now we've looked at 3 years, 19, 20, and 21. I find it's helpful to look at a broader range of time. So we've put a chart together from 2015 to 2025, total operating income and expenses. The blue line is income and the red line are expenses. The difference between is a surplus buffer that we typically incur each year. We have through 19, these are actuals. 20 is our forecast, almost an actual year. We have 2 months left. 21 through 25 are forecasts that we've developed as a team. Each year we extend this 1 more year because we have a rolling 5-year forward-looking forecast to help us prepare for any changes that we see coming on the horizon. The shaded area is the area that we are monitoring most closely because of COVID. So 20, 21, and 22 are years that we are keeping a close eye on for impact from the COVID pandemic. You'll notice that the expense gap between income and expenses in 20 is broad because we were able to keep our expenses fairly flat in total, but maintain revenue because we did receive a PPP loan that helped replace some of the revenue that had been where we've seen attrition. Looking at a subset of operating income, and this represents 75% of total income on average. This is apportionment related income. So this is unrestricted grants and apportionment income, and it supports a lot of the staff and programs directly focused on our churches. So we pay close attention to this section of the budget. Again, you can see even more impact from the pandemic in 2020. We were able to drop expenses because the camp was closed, so we avoided those expenses. And with our offices largely closed, we were able to avoid fixed costs with our buildings. Revenue did not decline, as I mentioned, because the PPP loan largely replaced the lost revenue impact from camp being closed and losing program fees. Note in 21, though, revenue continues to go down and expenses come back up as we plan to reopen all of our programs and buildings and camp. This revenue dropping is a conscious decision made by council and program and budget and commission on finance. We'll talk more about this reflection of financial support for the churches, where we're trying to get as close as we can in our budget to having the smallest possible surplus so that we can provide as much financial support to the churches as possible without experiencing a deficit that would require us to invade any of our endowments, which would be an absolute last choice for us. So this budget, and hopefully, particularly that last chart, reflects the thinking that we have spent a lot of time in this budget cycle thinking about how to balance our efforts of supporting churches financially impacted by COVID, and yet still maintaining an adequate reserve for a contingency just in case as the pandemic continues to evolve. So this financial support for churches, I haven't really talked much about that, and I'd like to spend the balance of the presentation running through 3 initiatives for financially supporting our churches going into 2021. 2 key areas is the 21 apportionment calculation and the PPP loan treatment. On the 21 apportionment calculation, we performed a survey in July. We had a 40% response rate from churches. And right now, I'd like to say thank you to all the churches that responded. This data was instrumental in our ability to help us build these financial support initiatives. So we were basing it on solid data, which allowed us to provide as much possible support and be confident based on our forecasting tools that we were not going to incur a deficit. So thank you. 20 churches provided data that was usable for our analysis. And what we did was we looked at the income mix in our churches among plate, pledge, other, which intends to include rental income and events, most impacted by the virus, and dividend income or investment income. And again, for those churches participating in the DIT, this would not change. This will be stable through 21. This survey demonstrated varying degrees of attrition in revenue comparing the second quarter versus the first quarter of 2020. First quarter is pre-COVID because it hit in late March. And the second quarter was post-COVID, which is where we measured the attrition rate. And by using a blended weighted average among these groups, we came up with a blended decrease of 6.1% in revenue among the churches. Thankfully, pledge had the least amount of impact and is the largest percentage of income for churches. So while plate was 60%, it's also the smallest percentage of income, so it didn't have as much impact and delivered us a 6.1% decline. Using this number then, we created a model that plugged in those different sources of income in the churches using the percentage decline for a period throughout the year of pre-COVID, closed, and reopening, though this may change, to help us predict if churches were to change from our traditional apportionment calculation methodology for 21 by giving churches the option of either using the traditional method of taking the 2019 apportionment worksheet that's based on 2019 revenue in the churches. That would generate $1.768 million in apportionment income to the diocese paid by the churches in 21. There's a 2-year lag. The proposal to council was, what if we let churches use their 2020 revenue so it's more real time? And it incorporates that 6.1% decline in revenue so that the expense of apportionment would be less to match the lower revenue. That would predict a $1.66 million in apportionment to the diocese. And it would allow $109,000 to remain in the churches as financial support. Council approved this proposal, and it's the first initiative from council. So churches may elect to use either their 2019 or their 2020 apportionment worksheet calculation to be used against their 21 apportionment, whichever is more favorable to the churches. So each church can individually select which year they would prefer to use. We believe most will use their 2020 because we believe almost all of our churches have been impacted from the pandemic on their revenue. The bottom line is this will allow congregations to retain $109,000 to help them navigate the impact of coronavirus through 21. So then we turned our focus onto the PPP subsidy loan, really unique program as a subsidy from the government to help offset the impact of the pandemic. We thought of this in the context of two groups of churches, those that received PPP loans and those that did not. So we looked at the ones that did first. We used the same revenue study we had used in July because we also asked churches to tell us if they received a PPP loan, and if they did, how much did they receive? 61% of our churches, 31, received a PPP loan, totaling almost $1 million in subsidy income. Very helpful. If we were to collect apportionment on this forgiven loan income, so from an accounting perspective, if you have a loan and you owe it back the money, but it's forgiven, so you no longer owe the money back and can keep it, it turns into income. And that income would traditionally be included in the apportionment calculation. And if churches are going to use their 2020 income or revenue to calculate 21 apportionment, it could include the PPP loan income, and it may end up making that initiative not very helpful to churches. Furthermore, we did a further study on this, and we looked at churches' revenue trends who received PPP loans and uncovered in that same revenue study, comparing Q1 to Q2 of this year, that 90% of the churches who applied for a loan had a revenue loss. Now, if you take the amount of revenue loss and extend it throughout the rest of 2020, Q3 and 4, half of those churches would experience a deficit by the end of the year, meaning they would have consumed the PPP loan income by the end of the year. The other half of the churches that would have some reserve to carry into 21, if we charge apportionment, we're either going to exacerbate a deficit in the churches, half of them that received a loan, or we're going to diminish their ability to weather 21 as this pandemic continues to linger on. So we believe that it was appropriate for council to make the decision that the forgiven PPP loan income will be exempt from calculating apportionment. And we realize that there's a portal in the banks where an application is submitted for forgiveness. It may not be 100%. This model is assuming 100% forgiveness for all churches. I hope that's the case. It should be in most cases, based on the information we're receiving on the rules for forgiveness. But it will translate into $125,000, assuming 100% is forgiven for the churches to retain. Now, the Small Business Administration that is sponsoring these loans has 5 months to respond to these applications. So it could be churches won't get confirmation of the forgiveness till next year. And I just want to be clear that the timing really doesn't matter in this decision. If the loan is forgiven this year or it's forgiven next year, it does not matter on timing. The forgiven income will not be charged apportionment in the churches. That's $125,000 incremental dollars applicable to the 31 churches that received the PPP loan. That was the second initiative that was approved. So the third group that we looked at are churches who had not received a PPP loan. And as we investigated this data, we found that there was a predominance of small churches that were not able to apply for the loan. The PPP loan was really not designed for small churches. Our small churches, 20 of them that didn't receive a PPP loan, tend to have employees that are 1099, supply priest, They may have a very small base of volunteers unable to navigate an extremely complicated application to receive a PPP loan. And so we decided as a diocese that we would put together a formula that would estimate the amount of PPP loan churches would have received if they had applied. Now, a few churches elected not to apply at that point in time, because the context at that time was we all thought this was going to be a short pandemic. So the diocese, to help financially support those churches, the proposal was to provide grants approximating the PPP loan to those 20 churches. Now there's a quartile 1 and a quartile 2. What we did was we broke up all of our churches ranked by their size of operating income and expenses. And this quartile 1 are the smallest churches, quartile 2 is the next size. This would be the midpoint where this is halfway on average for church size. So the majority of these loans are going to the smaller churches in our diocese, and the total would be $267,000. That's $197,000 or 2/3 going to the smaller churches and $70,000 going to the next size up. So in thinking about how would we fund this and how does this tie into the 21 budget, the $267,000? Money's fungible, so we can think about it in different ways. If I'm thinking about this in the context of the SBA giving us the loan, we definitely had revenue impact, and it helped us with preserving our staffing structure and our program structure in the diocese, no doubt about it. However, another perspective in parallel could be that the diocese who received $288,000 in a PPP loan, this is the way we prefer to think about it in the context of this budget. The diocese applied for a PPP loan on behalf of the churches who could not or decided not to at that point in time. So the proposal to council from the Commission on Finance and Program and Budget teams was to pass through 100% of our PPP loan to the churches in need of grants that did not receive a PPP loan. And so the diocese will provide grants to churches who did not receive a PPP loan, and it will be an additional $266,000 in grants that we will pass through to churches as financial support in 21. In summary, these three initiatives, the apportionment relief for 21 used in the 20 worksheet of $109,000, and on the PPP loan side, those that received a loan, $125,000 remaining with the churches. Those that did not, grants of $267,000, total $501,000 of support in 21 going to the churches. All of this is baked into the 21 budget. So we can ask the question, is it enough? Based on what we can see today, and that is a big caveat with this pandemic, the total operating church income forecast, if you recall, we have 15 through 19 of actual total operating income for churches. Now this is churches' operating income, totaled for the diocese, in 19 reached 12.8 million. And you can see it was an upward trend. If we account for the 6% in revenue decline that we measured in the study and assume a partial recovery in 21, a further recovery in 22, the area under this curve to get us back to pre-COVID level of revenue for the churches, this would be the attrition of revenue among those churches' operating income. That total area is 1.48 million. In looking at the subsidy from the PPP loan of almost $1 million, the $500,000 from the three initiatives I just covered, that total is 1.466 million. We're $12,000 short of covering the forecast attrition and impact from the pandemic, given what we can see today. If it changes, then we will work as a team to try and continue to support the churches as it evolves. But we've made a sincere effort here this year as a team to collectively and creatively put together a program that dovetails with our budget. And that is by continuing our key diocesan programs and initiatives in that traditional budget approach that supports all of our churches, retaining reserves for the unknown so that we avoid any erosion in our endowments, and then balancing our efforts to help the churches financially with support in 21, because this is such a unique year. So be available for any questions, and I'd welcome any comments that you have on the budget. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dennis. Are there questions? If you'd raise your hand. All right, sorry, I'm reading in the chat list. Rob Travis had a note. Rob will follow up with your note on the correction. So thank you. I just want to say thank you again to the team that worked so hard, particularly the question of how to handle the PPP loans. It was incredibly difficult to find a fair solution and a just solution. Elizabeth Habecker, you have your hand up. I ask you to unmute and ask your question. Liz Habecker. Oh, you're still muted, my sister. I can't unmute you. You have to unmute yourself. While she's doing that, Nancy, I see your hand up. Would you ask your question?
Yes, I just would like to know that we must be certain that the loan forgiveness program will allow the diocese to do that pass-through to the churches. Is that considered an allowable use of the diocesan PPP loan?
Dennis, do you want to respond? You need to unmute yourself.
Yes. Thank you, Nancy. So two points to make that. Thanks for the question. And it's a good one. So as I mentioned, money is fungible. So from an SBA's perspective, we have payroll data to document that we were able to retain staff, and we have clear documentation from our auditors that we had revenue impact that would justify applying for the loan. So applying for a loan, absolutely. And we had conversations with our chancellor, with the national church. As you recall, some of you that were more closely involved, it required certifications that we needed the loan, and we felt prior to in applying that we definitely met those criteria. Now, in using and this perspective I mentioned, it's just an internal perspective because money is fungible, whether it moves to this area or that area and how you look at it. But this is just an internal view to say, one internal perspective could be that we pass through this money. So the challenge would be, or the risk would be, what if we don't qualify for 100% forgiveness as a diocese? We've already submitted the application, and that application's been forwarded to the SBA. And when churches go through the process of submitting that application to their bank through the portal, they'll get an immediate response back if, based on the data they submitted, what percentage of forgiveness will they receive. And the acknowledgement back from Citizens Bank was 100% forgiveness.
Thank you.
So we'll be able to pass through the funds.
Okay, thank you very much.
You bet.
Liz Habecker, are you ready?
Thank you. It's hard to be unmuted. The question I had was for the small congregations, how will they receive that money that was described to being shared from the PPP grant?
Thanks for that question as well, because I do want to make a point of clarification. I have to say, it's challenging to watch yourself present. And I saw where I misspoke once and said that the grants to the small churches would come through for 21. It's actually in 20. So Joan DeSales and I are working right now to prepare checks to go to the churches. And it'll go out with a cover letter, most likely within the next couple of weeks, because we're very sensitive to the fact that these churches haven't received their support to date. And many of these churches have fourth quarter Christmas bazaars, holiday events that they're not going to be able to hold. And they definitely need the money as quickly as possible.
Thank you.
You bet.
Dennis, before you mute yourself, we have another question, I think, coming, but I see a question in the chat box. Will the PowerPoint that you presented, is that able to be shared?
Absolutely.
All right. So
I'd be happy to.
Krista and I will work on getting that up on the Vimeo channel and send out a link for those who want to use it in their parishes. Father Nathan, you have a question.
Yes, first of all, I want to thank you, Dennis, and the Council and the Commission on Finance for your excellent work in being very humane and Christian in your assumptions. It really is a community effort, and I appreciate that very deeply. And I'm speaking as a church that isn't going to get one of these checks, so I'm really just appreciative that you're doing this for the other churches. One of my questions is about planning for 2021. Is there any assumption that you've made that there will be a renewal of stimulus in 2021 after the presidential election has been settled?
That's a great question, Nathan. And it's, requires a crystal ball that is very cloudy right now as we continue to wait for the outcome of the election. Or who would have guessed that this pandemic would come back with such, aggressive growth. And so it's just feel confident that we've got a process as a team that as we learn, we adapt. And this is from my entrepreneurial background. So I feel confident that we have the resources and the reserves that we've maintained in that balance, that if it takes a turn, we'll adapt to it. Did we make assumptions of further subsidies? No, we did not. If we receive further subsidies, that would be terrific. But just being conservative, and until the ink is dry on a piece of paper authorizing the subsidy, we assume there isn't one.
Thank you. Are there any? I see no other hands raised. Then I call on the secretary to make a motion to accept the budget and set the apportionment amount. Bettine?
Okay. I move that the budget of the Diocese of Rhode Island, with an apportionment percentage of 15% for calendar year 2021, be hereby approved and adopted as presented. And that for the purposes of apportionment for fiscal year 2021, income of each parish and organized mission shall be an amount equal to total normal operating income as set forth in the report known as the parochial report for the Episcopal Church, less deductions approved by Diocesan Council of the Diocese of Rhode Island for the first or second fiscal year at each church's election immediately preceding the 2021 budget year.
Thank you, Bettine. That motion is before us. Do I have a motion? Will someone move that motion?
Move the motion.
Thank you. I have has moved. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Do we have a voting tool to put up? Are you ready to vote? Please vote. Poll will close in 5 seconds.
Shouldn't it be the 2021 budget?
Yes.
The motion said 2020.
100%.
Thank you. Rich, I'm just going to stop sharing that motion and I'm going to double check the language of the motion. The motion language that I have before me, I think it's a typo on the slide, but Bettine read 2021.
Right.
And that's the motion I have before me as well, 2021. So unless there's an objection from the parliamentarian, we'll go with the written form of the motion. And hearing none.
Thanks very much, Weldon. I hope you enjoy your weekend.
Thank you. Reminder, if you could mute, we hear you all after you've moved and seconded. We have now a rendition of canon changes from General Convention that we were required to read. It'll take about 6 or 7 minutes, and then we're going to have a 5 to 10, well, we're going to take a 10-minute break as we finish the reading because the chair needs to get a glass of water and a cup of tea or something. And then we will come back and we have the bishop's address, and I have a thank you video to show for people, and we will conclude our work. We should be done, I think, by 11 o'clock at this point. So I am going to.
Bishop, do we have a result of the vote?
Oh, it was 100% in favor. Sorry, I thought I had shared it. All right, and desktop 2.
The proposed amendments to the Constitution of the Episcopal Church are to be read by the Secretary of Diocesan Convention, preceding the final vote on these amendments at the 80th General Convention of the Church in 2021. Some of these amendments were read at our conventions in 2018 and 2019, and these are the final ones to be read. Luckily, there are only 3, so it won't take too long. Number A, 153, amend Article 4 of the Constitution. Resolved that Article 4 of the Constitution is hereby amended to read as follows. Article 4. In every diocese, a standing committee shall be elected by the convention thereof, except that provision for filling vacancies between meetings of the convention may be prescribed by the canons of the respective dioceses. When there is a bishop in charge of the diocese, the standing committee shall be the bishop's council of advice. If there be no bishop or bishop coadjutor or bishop suffragan canonically authorized to act, the standing committee shall be the ecclesiastical authority of the diocese for all purposes declared by General Convention. The rights and duties of the standing committee, except as provided in the Constitution and canons of the General Convention, may be prescribed by the canons of the respective dioceses. Number A, 176, amend Article 5, second reading. Note that this is actually a first reading because there was a floor amendment in 2018, and therefore this must be read again in 2021. Resolved that Article 5, Section 1 is amended as follows. Section 1. A new diocese may be formed with the consent of the General Convention and under such conditions as the General Convention shall prescribe by general canon or canons. 1, by the division of an existing diocese. 2, by the junction of 2 or more dioceses or parts of 2 or more dioceses. Or 3, by the erection into a diocese of an unorganized area evangelized as provided in Article 6. The proceedings shall originate in a convocation of the clergy and laity of the unorganized area called by the bishop for that purpose, or with the approval of the ecclesiastical authority in the convention of the diocese to be divided. Or when it is proposed to form a new diocese by the junction of 2 or more existing dioceses or of parts of 2 or more dioceses, by mutual agreement of the conventions of the diocese concerned, with the approval of the ecclesiastical authority of each diocese. After consent of the General Convention, when a certified copy of the duly adopted Constitution of the new diocese, including an unqualified accession to the Constitution and canons of this church, shall have been filed with the Secretary of the General Convention and approved by the Executive Council of this church, such new diocese shall thereupon be in union with the General Convention. Number A, 183, amend Article 9, first reading. Resolved that the Constitution, Article 9, be amended to read as follows. Article 9. The General Convention may, by canon, establish one or more courts for the trial of bishops. Presbyters and deacons shall be tried by a court instituted by the General Convention by canon. The General Convention, in like manner, may establish or may provide for the establishment of courts of review of the determination of diocesan or other trial courts. The court for the review of the determination of the trial court on the trial of a bishop shall be composed of bishops only. The General Convention, in like manner, may establish an ultimate court of appeal solely for the review of the determination of any court of review on questions of doctrine, faith, or worship. None but a bishop shall pronounce sentence of suspension or removal or deposition from the ministry on any bishop, presbyter, or deacon. And none but a bishop shall admonish any bishop, presbyter, or deacon. A sentence of suspension shall specify on what terms or conditions and at what time the suspension shall cease. A sentence of suspension may be remitted in such manner as may be provided by canon. The end.
I wish I did not find that all so interesting, especially that last bit. We are going to take a recess, and I'm going to call us back into session at 10:40. It's 10:27 now. At 10:40, I encourage you to return. I have a thank you for so many of you. And then we'll have a bishop's address that is only 16 minutes. And then we will be done, which I think will get us out of here at 11. So we are in recess until 10:40. 2-minute warning, everyone. Hopefully you can hear this. I'm having a cup of tea in my fine ECC tea mug. One minute. Really don't want to miss this, I hope. Bettine, thank you for your reading of the resolutions. I was deeply moved, and
Yeah, so inspiring.
I once had lunch with Hayes Rockwell early in November, and he and I were talking, and he said about a year after he retired as bishop, he and Linda were walking around and he just had this big grin on his face. And Linda turned to him and said, "Hayes, why are you so happy?" And he said, "Do you know, they're having the diocesan convention in Missouri right now, and I'm not there." Well, I don't think it'll be anytime soon that I'm going to have that experience, but it will be on my list eventually. And I will look forward with a great grin. There's just so many things to say thank you for in all of this. And before I roll a video, I want to say thank you to my staff. I cannot put into words how grateful I am. You know, Canon Dina, who joined our staff just over a year ago, has been instrumental to what we've been able to accomplish this year. And when I was sick with what we believe was COVID early in March, when I didn't know what was going to happen, and I said, "Dina, I need you to make the day-to-day decisions because I'm not sure what's going to happen to me." She stepped right into that role, took over the updates, and has managed everything superbly. For Liz and Marianne and Kristen, who you have no idea how many curveballs I have tossed them or said, "Can we do this?" And they have managed it incredibly. They have done it with aplomb. To Betsy and to Joni in the charities office to come up with this idea of Charities Now and to raise the money that we were able to raise to help people in this moment of need was extraordinary. Joan DeSells, who has continued to go into the office and be the person who is present on site, to have managed all of the bookkeeping and all of the changes and helped with the PPP loans. And again, all of the things that we've thrown at her. The camp staff has been amazing. The staff from the Center for Reconciliation has been amazing. And you all should know how grateful I am. And I hope you are just as grateful as I am. I want to say thank you now to a number of you who have just been extraordinary. Hi, everyone. You don't need me to tell you that this has been a crazy year, full of the unexpected. But in the midst of everything that has happened this year, I have watched the clergy of Rhode Island from the very first week of this pandemic rise to the challenge of serving our churches and people in this diocese. This work has not been easy, and we've had to learn how to do almost everything in new ways. How to worship while apart, how to preach to a video camera, how to create community in a radically different context. And yet we have found ways. Our clergy have persevered and worked tirelessly to make sure our churches continue to be places of comfort, connection, inspiration, and action. The clergy of this diocese have learned new ways to teach and do Bible study. They have gathered youth groups and young adult groups in new ways online. They have supported families who have lost loved ones and those who are frantic with care and concern for sick family members that they can't even visit. I have heard their calls for justice and reconciliation in moments when we are physically and politically divided. I wanted to make this video as a small token of my appreciation for our clergy and the teams of the people that support them and who work with them. Friends, I see you. I see how hard you are working and how deeply you love. I see you. I see you finding new ways to connect to your people. I see you doing the hard work of finding ways to worship together. I see you in your homes. I see you outdoors. I see you indoors. I see your people and your teams helping to make this possible. I see you trying to reach the children. I see your creativity. see your creativity. Well, it was going so well. Let me just see. We are missing the last few minutes of that, and I'm going to ask Krista if she can find it. There's a few more minutes. We're going to put it up for everybody. There's just some more incredible videos of everything the clergy have done. And as I say, and I'm glad we did it by video because I was bursting into tears again and again all through that, how grateful I am. We have done extraordinary things in incredible and difficult times. And all of you have every reason to be grateful to the clergy of this diocese, and all of you who are ordained and have stepped up in this moment have every reason to be proud of what you have accomplished. So thank you for that. Kristen, I'll see if we can figure out where the rest of that video has gone, and instead I will show you the bishop's address, which is not nearly as interesting or as impressive as that. So hold on one second. Unusual convention, and this is going to be an unusual convention address. We have much to be thankful for. In the midst of all of this storm, in the midst of all of this uncertainty, we have managed not to thrive as much, but we have managed to continue to be an effective community, worshiping, praying, and serving. The Archbishops of Canterbury and York and the Bishop of London wrote a letter to the people of the Church of England earlier this week as they were facing a new lockdown in England. The bishops said that the vocation of the church in England is to pray and to serve. And I spent some time thinking about that and realized essentially that's a summary of the law. You shall love the Lord your God, and you shall love your neighbor as yourself. The job of the church is to pray, and the job of the church is to serve. And we have done both of those things in this moment. We have done both of those things in this moment in ways that we did not anticipate we could do. And we have responded in ways that I would not have imagined we would have responded. But I have been gratified to see that what I had always suspected is in fact true. I always have thought that the Episcopal Church and all of you have an extraordinary range of gifts. And all that had to happen was for us to start believing in our ability to do things in new and creative ways. In the midst of this pandemic, we had been forced to do just that. And you all have risen to the challenge. In the first few weeks, when we were scrambling to try to understand what it was going to be like to be church in a moment that none of us anticipated, you figured out how to stream your services on Facebook. We used our cell phones to create Bible studies. We learned new ways to gather and have meetings, and we managed to keep things going. And as time has gone on, we have gotten more skilled. We have begun to experiment with these new tools, and there are things that are happening that are extraordinary and are new, things that we wouldn't have been able to do before. A lot of people have said that there isn't much life left in the Episcopal Church. And a lot of people have looked at our demographic trends and said that we have no future. I think our experience in these last few months have shown that not to be true. we are ready to step into a new future. We have the capacity to transform ourselves, and we have a passion for being the people of God, no matter what the circumstances. Early next year, we will be holding a conference on how to lead when you don't know where you're going. We've engaged Reverend Susan Beaumont to come and work with us to help us both at the diocesan level and I hope in our congregational settings to begin to think about what it is that we need to do next as a people. We don't know where we're going. We don't know when this pandemic will end. We don't know when the division that we are feeling as a community will be resolved. We don't know how we are going to respond to the true struggles that we have to overcome racism, that we have to overcome poverty, that we have to overcome inherent sexism in our society. We have all those things in front of us. We will respond to them. And I expect we will respond with power and we will respond with love. But we need to think about how that's going to happen. And I encourage you all to plan, if you can at all, in participating in this conference. It's going to have video presentations and then there'll be discussion. And it's not going to give us a sudden plan that we're going to all be able to use, but it's going to show us a new way of imagining how we as a community picking our way through into a future that we do not yet recognize or cannot fully understand, will be able to thrive because we'll be able to refine our vision of who we are as we move into this new time in the history of the church. I also, this year, particularly want to say thank you. I want to say thank you to my staff. We were thrown the biggest curveball I ever imagined we could be thrown. And the staff of the diocese, the staff across the state have responded incredibly. The camp staff has figured out new ways to hold programs when we can't gather. They have used this time creatively, and we are investing in refreshing the facilities at camp so that when we can be back together, we'll have an even stronger and more productive program. The Center for Reconciliation made a transition from in-person events to these online webinars, and we have seen that attendance go up by a factor of 10. And we have now been able to bring people in to speak to us from all around the country. And we have had some extraordinary lessons and speakers. We're learning how to do a museum that's both virtual and socially distanced. I want to thank the staff who have worked so hard there. And I want to thank the board of directors who have worked to refine the mission and come up with a vision of how we will do the work of responding to historic racism and the legacy of slavery in this country now in the 21st century. I want to thank my direct staff as well. Right from the very beginning, when we began to try to understand what the financial implications were going to be, to see the finance department, to see Dennis Burton, to see the finance commission and diocesan council and standing committee all just rise to the occasion. We have been able to find ways to support our congregations in the midst of all of this. And thanks be to God, we made some good decisions a few years ago. And because of those good decisions, we have the resources to be able to help. We can't make it all go away and we can't undo the strains that we're all feeling, but at least we can take some of the financial pressure and put it to the side so that in this moment we can focus on what the mission is of this church and how God is calling us to respond and not be completely worried or totally focused on the fear of not being able to pay our bills. Most of us, all of us, have been able to take that to heart and have been creative and have been able to be responsive. And I think that is probably the most important thing for us to hear. We have the resources, we have the creativity, and we can do what we need to do. I thank the staff as well because we have made a transition to working remotely. It happened very quickly and unexpectedly, and They have managed to learn new tools and new techniques and new technologies. And frankly, I think we're working as well apart as we work together. And I'm beginning to think about what it might look to model a new way of being a diocesan staff and a new way of being the people of God in this state. I also want to encourage us, because I think what has happened in all this is we've begun to realize that we have some new capabilities that we didn't have before. Having diocesan convention electronically in this way has allowed people who wouldn't have otherwise been able to attend. We've seen that at Diocesan Council. We've seen that at Standing Committee. In both of those entities, people have asked if we could continue meeting this way, even after we're able to gather again, because it makes it easier for people who wouldn't otherwise be able to participate in the governance of the diocese to fully participate in the governance. Younger people who have childcare issues, people who live far away from Providence and couldn't manage the traffic and didn't have the time to drive all the way in and all the way back, can give of their gifts to the work of the church. People who are on Block Island are able to fully participate in the Diocesan Investment Trust, are able to participate in Standing Committee in ways that wasn't possible before we got to this moment. I think there's a lot more for us to imagine and think about. One of the things we're beginning to imagine is what it would look like to begin to hold services at the cathedral, not necessarily in person, but in a virtual way, in an online way. We had a Compline service at the cathedral for election night. We are planning a Thanksgiving service at the cathedral, and we are planning a Christmas service at the cathedral. It will be a way for us to reach people who don't have a church. It will be a way for us to reach people who maybe have become estranged from congregations or have become estranged from their faith. And that's really the dream of what a cathedral can be for us, that bridge, that place where the secular world meets the sacred world. And it gives us a place to experiment and try new things to see how we can more effectively proclaim the gospel. So I ask your prayers for all that in this coming time. I thought a lot about this address, and if I wanted to lay out a grand vision or I wanted to try to have soaring rhetoric, I'll admit that I recorded this yesterday and I found that my recording ran 45 minutes. And thanks be to God, my microphone died halfway through. And you can also thank God that my microphone died halfway through so that you don't have to sit here for 45 minutes and listen to me go on. I think rather than trying to lay out a grand vision, what I want to do is look to the immediate. Let us get through this pandemic. Let us get through this present crisis. And then we can take stock of where we are and begin to think of what comes next. As I said, we're having to plan for a future that we do not recognize yet. We're being asked to lead in a moment where we do not know where we're going. So what can we do in this moment? I think there are two pastoral things that I want to say to all of you. And I think it's important for us to hold this in front of the entire state right now. This is going to be a hard winter. The health department has been telling us all along that with the collision of the normal flu season and now this pandemic, as well as everything else, we will struggle. I was in a meeting earlier this week with Dr. Alexander Scott, and she told us that unless something really significant changes, we expect to exceed the capacity of Rhode Island's hospitals within the next 3 weeks. That means we'll have to open the field hospitals. That means we may see increasing restrictions on our ability to gather. And it means that our Thanksgiving and our Christmas will be radically different. They had Thanksgiving in Canada a few weeks ago, and as a result of people gathering in family groups, the COVID infection rate has risen significantly. There is a great and realistic fear here in the state that trying to gather at Thanksgiving time for us will cause the same thing to happen. And I know the governor is already asking us to avoid that. And I want to ask you, as much as it is possible for you, to cooperate with what the health department is asking us to do. I think if we begin to plan now for what a holiday season will be like in an unusual and hopefully once in a lifetime moment, we can begin to prepare for a return to normal. Christmas is going to be very different. I've spoken with the clergy about this previously, and I now want all of you to know that we are going to have to plan to hold our Christmas services differently this year. I think it'll be back to normal in a year, but for this year, rather than trying to find ways to make it normal, rather than trying to find ways to work around restrictions because we don't want to miss one more thing, I think we just have to recognize that we will. It's okay to grieve that. It's okay to be sad about that. But it's also our vocation as Christians to do what we can to protect our neighbors, to serve the community in which we find ourselves. And we have to balance our call to pray and gather in community to worship God with our responsibility to serve our community and protect our community from illness and disease. Hopefully this will pass quickly and we will return to worshiping together. Maybe by this spring, God willing, at Easter time or Pentecost, we will be able to gather together again. Differently, but we'll be able to gather together again. How I long for the moment when we can sing together. How I long for the moment when we can hear one another lifting our voices in song and praise to God. But for now, we do it apart. For now, we are the church in a moment of exile, but there will be a restoration and we will return to one another, and there will be singing and laughter and feasting in the land, because that is always how it is with God. God is with us in the moments of difficulty, and God restores us with joy and laughter. Hold fast to that in these coming months. Grieve, but anticipate. Long and dream. Know that we have a capacity we didn't know we had, and we are responding in ways that people did not expect us to be able to do. You should be very proud of that. I'm so proud of you, and I'm so grateful to be walking this journey alongside of you. May we see God ever more truly and ever more profoundly in the midst of us as we walk into this future together. Amen. Okay. Usual convention. Thank you. Let me just see if I it's a shame because we're missing 3 or 4 minutes of that wonderful video. And of course, the internet gods are against me. Well, clearly I am a sinner and I'm being punished. We'll get it up. And please, if you can, share it with your congregation so that they can see it as well. I think that's all we have. Following adjournment, please stay on. Let's hope that we have one more hymn for you, and a thank you for the professional musicians around the state. We're aware of how things have changed for the clergy. I don't think we fully anticipate or understand how much this has impacted our music ministries in the state, and they have had to figure out ways to be musicians in a time when we can't sing together. And that's really, really hard. All right, so as a motion to adjourn is in order. I see Scott saying, so moved. Scott Avedisian moved it. He didn't mute himself. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded.
Thank you. All right. Members, stay on for the final hymn. The motion, all in favor? Is anyone objecting to adjourning? No. All right. Thank you. Then we are adjourned. Let us pray. Oh God, by your grace, you have called us in this diocese to a goodly fellowship of faith. Grant that your word may be truly preached and truly heard, your sacraments faithfully administered and faithfully received. By your Spirit, fashion our lives according to example of your Son, and grant that we may show the power of your love to all among whom we live. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen.
I will, I'm going to roll this here, and then I'm going to just tell you in advance that I'm going to ask Kristen to send out a link to the thank you video so that you can share that around with your congregations, and we can all say thank you as we need to. So 1 second, I'll find this, and I did not know I would be. we'll have that available for you too. Just give me 1 second. I think we have the full version of the video. Let me see if I can get it scrolled. All right, I'll try this one last time for those of you who've stuck around. I see your outreach and the ways you are trying to reach your communities. I see your faithfulness. These images and videos give us glimpses into the myriad of ways that our clergy are connecting with members of their congregation and with others, with people who have found their ways to God in the midst of this unprecedented time. We don't have videos of the tears I know they have wept out of frustration, loneliness, and confusion. We don't see the hours and hours they spend learning new technology to try and reach people while printing and mailing service bulletins to the people who don't use the internet. We don't see their spouses and children holding the cameras and editing the videos to upload on YouTube, the fights that inevitably ensue from a family effort that nobody asked for. We don't see those who live alone, pressing their own record buttons in quiet apartments, speaking to cameras when no one else is in the room to respond. We don't see countless committee Zoom calls and drafts of reopening plans. We don't see emails from people begging the church to reopen and others begging for it to stay closed. We don't see it all, but we know. I know. And I'm tremendously grateful for all the ways you have given of yourselves to meet the needs of our community in a time when everyone is dealing with issues of their own. I am grateful for you. I am proud of you. It is an honor to be your bishop. now you can understand why I wanted you to see the end of it. So thank you for Kristen for getting that to work. So and thank you for all the kind things in the chat box. All right, well, we're adjourned, and I see a sandwich for lunch in my future, and then I have to set up my studio and try and record my sermon this afternoon, and I bet a bunch of you do that as well. So we'll have that link. This link will be sent out to everybody. Please share it around, put it up on social media. I'd love for people in the diocese to be able to say thank you to their clergy, just as I'm trying to say thank you. It's been an extraordinary time. Blessing of God Almighty, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit be upon you right now and remain with you forever. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you.
God bless you all.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Go in peace.
Thank you.
Thank you, Daddy.
Thank you for everything.